going to, of course, continue talking about ancient Egypt. I think last time where we were, if I'm not mistaken, I think we were talking about mummification. We had kind of gone through, I think we talked about, Egyptian mythology, some of their famous gods. We talked about how the Egyptians mummified their dead. Now I'm going to move on to talk about the so-called Old Kingdom, which, as you know, has a nickname. They often call it the so-called Age of Pyramids, because you can see here they were famous for constructing all these large-sized tombs throughout ancient Egypt. Those, of course, is the peak of pyramid building was the 4th dynasty, which built the Giza pyramids, which are right where Cairo is today. So we're gonna mostly talk about that, how the development of the tombs kind of got going, of course, in ancient Egypt. I'll mostly talk about the 3rd and 4th dynasty. That's the famous periods of when the best pyramids were built. But they did build pyramids up to, I think, the 12th dynasty throughout Egypt in the Middle Kingdom. Now, the Age of Pyramids, the so-called Old Kingdom, has relatively about 4 major dynasties. They got the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th dynasties. Sometimes they do include the 7th and 8th in it, some kind of variations of that. Although a lot of times the 7th and 8th dynasties are included in the so-called First Intermediate Period. Because if you remember correctly, I think I showed you recently, we could bring it up again, but I think I had showed you the different periods of ancient Egypt that they had. You remember correctly? And so you got the Old Kingdom, of course. We're talking about the Age of Pyramids, Middle and New Kingdoms as well. And they got these intermediate periods I told you about that are kind of between the major kingdoms that they had. So predominantly the Old Kingdom is, they think, mostly 3rd through 6th dynasties, with the best pyramids, of course, being constructed in the 3rd and 4th ones overall. 5th dynasty was famous for the so-called pyramid texts, and they started writing in the actual pyramids and things like that later. Now, one thing about the Old Kingdom itself, they're known for building a lot of these so-called necropolis sites, which cities of the dead, where they buried people like pharaohs, nobility, and other people. And they believe a lot of this construction of it began as far back as the pre-dynastic period, around the time of King Menes. That's when they started building all these tombs everywhere. The Egyptians didn't want to, live where their dead were. I don't think most people want to live in a cemetery, do you? So a lot of their actual necropolis sites, if you know about this, were all put on the West Bank. A lot of people kind of wonder why that is. Why was it put on the West Bank? A lot of it had to do with theology and the fact that the Egyptians believed that the god Ra, the sun god, was immortal and had traveled through the underworld at night. So the god would rise in the east and set in the west. And so the belief was that when the sun went west, when it went down, that's where the dead went. See inside of what? The tombs? Oh, well, yeah, I think you're talking about the tombs, right, Tonica? The tombs were eventually blocked off, but they were later all robbed, if you know about ancient times. Probably by the First Intermediate Period, I think they were robbed, or they believe. Yeah, most all the tombs were robbed. Valley of the King's tombs were also robbed, also as well, except for King Tut's tomb, of course, later. Hey, good morning, Devin. What's going on? Hey, Gavin. What's going on? Also as well. So anyway, I'll kind of talk about some of these different necropolis sites. I don't know if I have a good map of it, but these are examples of different necropolis sites that were famous in ancient Egypt. Abydos, I think south of Cairo, is considered one of the oldest. That's where actually King Menes, or Narmer, was buried. I think they found his tomb later. And then Saqqara is near Memphis. That's another necropolis site. That's where King Djoser's pyramid was built, and a bunch of other ones there early on, 3rd dynasty. Midum is like south of Cairo. I think I want to say 50 miles south of Cairo. It's another necropolis site. It's where the Mitam Pyramid is. Dashur is another site about 20, 30 miles south of Cairo. It's where the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid were built, famously in Egypt. Then you got Giza, which, that's another one, of course, Old Kingdom as well, 4th dynasty, called the Giza Complex, Burial Complex, or Giza Necropolis. It's called all kinds of names. That's where the Giza pyramids were built by the 4th dynasty. Then the Valley of the Kings was built by the New Kingdom. That was a series of rock-cut tombs that were built by the 18th to the 20th dynasties in Egypt. So these are all different necropolis sites that they had, of course, in ancient Egypt. Hey, Nat, what's going on? Hope you're having a good morning also as well. So anyway, I want to talk about some of the first tombs that were constructed, of course, in ancient Egypt. They always talk about the so-called mastaba or mastaba. It's called all kinds of names. It has multiple names of what they call it, but there's like an Egyptian, like an Arabic name, and they have the Egyptian name that they have. And mastabas were the first real tombs that were constructed in ancient Egypt. They think they were first built in the pre-dynastic period. Like going back to the time of King Menes or Narmer, they built these. And the term mastaba or mastaba is an Arabic term, which means, actually, it just means bench, is what it means in Arabic. But a lot of people will also say mud bench or stone bench, I think is another translation that they'll use because it was made of mostly mud brick. And then they had another name, which the Egyptians called it, which was the hieroglyphic name, which was Perzit. I think that's how they pronounced it, which meant either house of eternity or eternal house, because it was believed to be this, I guess, structure that helped to preserve your mummy, for the afterlife. Because I think I told you that the Egyptians believed that their body needed to be intact if they were going to make it through the underworld. It was like cut up, like they tried to do Osiris. Remember that? Basically, that meant that they wouldn't make it through the underworld. So mastabas were, by the way, they think developed, as far back as, Narmer's time, they were doing it, but they kept building these. Like I think up to like the old New Kingdom, they pretty much build these structures, throughout Egypt. You can see that what they would do is they would build a shaft down where they would put the burial chamber underneath the earth, and then they would put the mummy down there. About the Egyptians, they would store things down there with the mummy, thinking that they would need stuff in the afterlife, food or whatever. And then they would build like a superstructure, mud brick building on top of it. And sometimes they would include chambers with, like a mortuary chamber might be in there as well, where they could bring your body in there to be mummified, to be put, of course, in the structure, to be buried. The Egyptians, by the way, don't really put the actual, burial chamber in the actual structure until later. I think it's like 3rd dynasty. They start kind of doing that eventually. 3rd, 4th dynasty, they start trying to do that. And but oftentimes early on, the burial chamber was put like underground originally. So they have different versions. Like I've got pictures, I think, of showing some of the different mastabas that were built. I think here's one that was built in the 4th dynasty by one of their pharaohs. I think it's called the Mastabat al-Pharaon, the bench of the pharaoh, I think is what the name means. So that's one they probably pretty much restored that you're looking at. I think I showed you one that was a large size one, I think. That I want to say that one went back to the, thought I had one, there it is right there. There's one kind of on that left, right, this picture right here. It's kind of a larger size one. So something like a large size type, almost like the bottom of a pyramid. And so they think that, architecturally, more or less with these early, structures they built in Egypt, it was like the early version of a pyramid, like the bottom of it. And I think the belief about the step pyramids is that they stacked up the mastabas, and that's how they came up with the idea, of a pyramid. So I don't know this idea. Other people talk about aliens building pyramids and things like that. A lot of it's just the natural idea of architecturally, engineering of building stone up, from the ground. So anyway, it was. Well, I don't know. I thought it was. Yeah, I see that. I can find it for you if you want real quick and put that up. I don't know. It must have been the one from last time, but I'll put it up right now for you if you want overall. But anyway, I'll put it right here. So anyway, to continue, I want to talk about the actual so-called step pyramid. So that's the other design that is going to be, of course, famous next that we have that comes in. Of course, so-called step pyramid, like this so-called Pyramid of Djoser that they, of course, showed that little short video from National Geographic. You see, that's the evolution of the next pyramid design, of course, which, by the way, the Pyramid of Djoser is considered one of the oldest stone buildings ever built, of course, in the world. Anyway, the third dynasty is the one that started, building step pyramids. That's the next evolution, after the Mastabas, as they went to, of course, stacking stone up. And they went away from mud brick. That was the other thing it did too, where they basically started using like limestone, and also granite was also used in construction of a lot of these buildings overall. And anyway, the actual pyramid itself was constructed in the 27th century. So that'd be like 2600 BC. So 4,000 or 5,000 years ago is about when these pyramids were constructed first. And it was built at Saqqara. Saqqara was a necropolis site for a lot of the third dynasty pharaohs, which is near the ancient city of Memphis, close to Cairo, kind of west of the Delta. That's where it is. And anyway, you saw in the video, there was actually an Egyptian chancellor of some type who was like this polymath. He was like a priest. He was a doctor. I think he was a mathematician, engineer. He was the man that actually designed the actual pyramid structure, which ended up being like a six-step pyramid that he would build. And I think originally that what was going to happen, you look at this design right here, originally Djoser was planning to build a mastaba, but apparently Imhotep talked him into, building this pyramid structure. And so that's basically, they think that Imhotep was the father of the pyramids. They believe he's the one that kind of came up with the idea of that. Although I think the burial chamber of Djoser ends up being underground, like the mastabas, and not actually in the structure itself that they would build. It is a funny design. The dimensions of the actual pyramid is not like later pyramids later. As you know, later pyramids are like a perfect 3D object, like totally equal on the bottom, especially, and on all the sides. And but the actual pyramid is about a little bit over 200 feet tall, they think originally. It's kind of debated about the top of it, how high the top of it was, because that's been stripped off and they've kind of restored it over the years. It's been kind of rebuilt, Djoser's pyramid, but the dimensions of it are actually a rectangular shape. So 358 by 410 feet on each side is about the dimensions of it. The actual bottom, like the sixth level on the bottom, is kind of falling apart, as you can see. They have kind of, I think you saw in the video, they're actually trying to rebuild it and restore it to what they think it looked like a long time ago. So that's basically the development of these pyramids. Like were kind of built around that time, and I think even up to the fourth dynasty, they kept trying to build a lot of these types of pyramids originally. So from there, what happened next, after the step pyramid was designed, they then went towards developing, the so-called smooth-sided pyramid, I think is what they called it. Hey, Brandon, what's going on? Hope you're having a great morning out there. But they sometimes call it the true pyramid. I think that's one of the nicknames that they call the pyramid later. That's a smooth-sided pyramid where the pyramid is perfectly equal on all sides, like on the bottom. Each side is equal at the top. And they remove the steps. They eventually get rid of it. A lot of the pyramids today are stripped, so it does have steps on it now. But a long time ago, what the ancient Egyptians did was they used like more expensive white limestone casing to smooth out the sides on it, which I'll kind of show you a little bit. Some of the pyramids that still have that, of course, today. Now, the father, they think, of the true pyramid, or the so-called smooth-sided pyramid, is a pharaoh named Snefru, or also he goes by another name, I think Greek name, which is Soris, S-O-R-I-S. They believe that Snefru was the founder of the 4th dynasty, like one of the first pharaohs of it that came in as ruler. And he's also known as the father of King Khufu. You know, the Khufu was also called Cheops by the Greeks, that built the Great Pyramid of Giza. So his son is famous for being a pretty good pyramid builder himself as well. Most of those pyramids were built kind of around the 27th centuries. About BC is when a lot of these pyramids were constructed overall. They do think that he may have constructed at least 3 pyramids. There's a theory about it, which I kind of show you right here, but they think Snefru may have built 3 pyramids, one called the Midam Pyramid, which is kind of a debate about that one. Some claim he built it, and then some claim it was a pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty that was kind of working on it. And so they're kind of not sure exactly what it was. They think it may have been a step pyramid that collapsed. I think is the theory about it. And then you can see the other 2 pyramids were the bent pyramid and the red pyramid. They were built. And the Midam pyramid was built at a location called Midam, which Midam is located about 50 miles south of Cairo, roughly. And then the bent and red pyramid were built at a location that's called Dashur, or Dashur. I think it's Dashur, they say it, which is about 25 miles south of Cairo. So he built 2 there. It's kind of a necropolis site that's there at that location. And I'll kind of go through these pyramids and kind of discuss them because they're pretty famous. These pyramids are really considered to be some of the first real famous pyramids that are well known. Some of the first ones that are kind of smooth-sided as well. And the bent pyramid, which you can see here, was one of the first smooth-sided pyramids constructed. It's called different names. They call it the South Pyramid because it's south of the Red Pyramid. And the Red Pyramid is called the North Pyramid. So you get the names there with that. But yeah, it is famous for being like one of the first pyramids where they took the steps out of it and they used white limestone casing on the outside to smooth it out. And so they do believe that a long time ago that the ancient pyramids were all white looking. And I think you can sort of hear like a better view of like the white limestone casing that's put on the outside of it right here. It is known for its bent shape. It's the name, being called that. And it's because of the fact that the pyramid was built with 2 separate angles of inclination. Like they started on the bottom with a 54-degree angle, which they think the pyramid was constructed that way on purpose. And then for some reason, halfway up the pyramid, they figured out that they couldn't, I think, build the pyramid at a 54-degree angle. And so they changed the angle. So the upper casing has more of a 43-degree angle to it. So that's why it gives it a bent shape. So it looks like a really weird pyramid the way it's constructed. So it's not really like a traditional pyramid like you see later. But I'm thinking that the top of it, like you look at the top of it, especially from here, like up, where that 43-degree angle starts, you can kind of get the idea of where the pyramid design kind of comes from, right there. So, but evidently he abandoned that one. I don't think he's never buried in that one. And so he went to this other pyramid and started building that one instead, which is the so-called red pyramid that was built north of the bent pyramid. And this one has different nicknames to it. They also call it the Bat Pyramid, not because Batman's in it. Maybe he is, but there's a lot of bats in it. I think it's one of the very few pyramids you can go into still. Like you can go in the Great Pyramid, as an example. Just hard to get into. It's hard to get tickets to get into see that one. But apparently, the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid, you can. That one's not as well known, but those you can pretty much go into easily. But there's a lot of bats in it, and so hence the local people call it that actual name. Hey, Tabia. So anyway, so yeah, and by the way, this pyramid's pretty tall. Like at one point when it was constructed, when I guess Snefru built it, it was the tallest structure in the world. 345 feet tall, I think, is what the estimated height of the pyramid originally was. So I think it's been stripped off, and I forget what it is now, the actual amount, but it's less than that now. But that was what they think the original height was overall. And each side is about 720 feet. Perfect. So a lot of the dimensions on the bottom of the pyramids are pretty accurate. And it is still the third tallest pyramid ever built in Egypt, even after they built some other pyramids, of course, later. One thing about the Red Pyramid that is interesting, they started building the tombs inside. It's one thing, it was, of course, famous for its reddish color. The fact that they used local reddish limestone. Outside is like all built of limestone, and then the inside of the pyramid was built with granite. That's one thing that was just more expensive type stone. And they used local limestone quarries instead of getting it from, I think, Tura, somewhere in Egypt. Tura is like a very famous quarry area in Egypt where they got a lot of their limestone in Egypt. But evidently it had like reddish iron ore in it, I think, and so it's got this reddish color to it, but you weren't supposed to see it because of the white limestone that's on it. But, of course, since ancient times, it's been stripped off. But, yeah, it's famous for its tomb chamber, which has like 4 of them on the inside of it. And a lot of the tombs and a lot of the pyramids have what they call corbelled vaulted ceilings, where they kind of have these they kind of got these like the tomb kind of goes up to the top where they put the blocks up. They kind of go up to the top like a arch kind of, basically. So that's kind of how they built arches in those days, like a vaulted type ceiling. So most pyramids have also like I'll kind of show you a picture of the so-called pyramidion. They would put these capstones on the top of most pyramids, and they put them also on obelisks as well. Like the top of an obelisk has like a pyramidion on it as well, which I suppose that's where the first rays of the sun will hit the top of the pyramid. And I think there's a claim even that the ancient Egyptians would, I think, engrave the top of it with maybe gold or something. I think it's been one theory, because I think I've heard a theory where it's like, the top of the pyramid was all gold, and then but with the pyramidion, and then the whole rest of the pyramid was like all white. And that's what they look like originally a long time ago. And I think the original capstone of the Red Pyramid is gone. They built a replica of it, which is on the site where it is now today. That's a pyramidion you see there of Amenemhet III, who was a pharaoh, I think, going back to like the 12th dynasty, like a long time ago. So anyway, let's also talk about, so yeah, that's the beginning of the early pyramid design being constructed at that point. Now I'm going to move on next to talk about getting into the more famous ones that you probably have heard about, such as you've heard of the Great Pyramid of Giza, of course, which is well known. The Great Pyramid of Giza, as you know, was considered the greatest pyramid ever built in ancient Egypt. And he was the second pharaoh, by the way, of the 4th dynasty. Like I told you, he was the son of Snefru, King Soros, I told you about. And the Greeks, going back to Herodotus, called him Cheops. And he became well known for beginning like what is like a burial complex, which is near Cairo, often called the Giza complex or Giza I think Giza necropolis. It's called all kinds of names. That was built there. And as you know, it was the largest pyramid ever constructed. I think it was built sometime in the 26th century BC. I think even like the pyramids in like Mesoamerica, I think were not quite as tall, as this pyramid was constructed. And the whole burial complex is built west of Cairo. So it's like on the West Bank, like all these other necropolis sites that were built there. But it's not just his. It includes his, pyramid. And then you've got like his son's got a pyramid. His grandson's got a pyramid. I think mostly that's predominantly what was there. You got the Great Pyramid of Giza. You got the Pyramid of Khafre. You got the Pyramid of Menkaure. Those are the main pyramids that are there. They got the Queen's pyramids, who are related to King Khufu. The Great Sphinx is also there at that site, which is also famous as well. So you look at this image here, you can see it's a huge burial complex, which is, I forget how large of a size that is, but it's several thousand acres in size. And you can see they were kind of aligned almost perfectly, especially the pyramids of Khufu and Khafre were aligned, which some say they were actually aligned with some of the actual stars, because, the Egyptians knew a lot about astronomy and so on. So, but you can see it's a massive burial complex. It's not just nobility and so on that were buried there, but they even had actual tombs for the workers. The workers were actually buried at the site that actually built the actual complex itself. Now, talk a little bit about the Great Pyramid of Giza. All the stats on it and all that you probably want to know about. The height varies. I see all kinds of numbers on that. I think it's actually about 481 feet was the original height. They think, I usually just round it off to about 480. So about 480 feet, about maybe is what it is. I think they say the height now, after it's been stripped off, it's about 455 or 456 feet. That's what it is now, after the capstone and all that was stripped off later. Actually, each side is almost about 765 feet in design. So it's actually, pretty almost equal. Actually, I got that wrong. I just noticed a typo on that. I've got to solve that. 756 feet is actually correct. I'm going to fix that. I've got to solve that. But yeah, 756 feet on each side is actually the width. Total space, like of the actual pyramid, like of where it is, it's about 13 acres. And one thing about the Great Pyramid of Giza, they could literally put all kinds of famous buildings there, like the Colosseum in Rome, the Capitol building, in Washington, D.C., like the Congress building could be put there. Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. You could put St. Peter's Cathedral. You could put probably a bunch of buildings there all in one spot where the pyramid is. So such a large structure that was built. It's the only seven wonder of the world that's still around, according to the ancient Greeks. That was built along. I think it was the first one built, they say, and it's the only one still standing now today. So it's getting close to almost 4,000 years old. So it's a pretty old man-made structure that was built a long time ago. By Napoleon's time, because Napoleon, if you know about it, popularized the study of Egyptology when he invaded Egypt in 1798. And they estimated that during his time, like up to like the early 1800s, that the pyramid was built with something like 2.3 million stone blocks. I think the average stone block inside the Great Pyramid weighs between 2 and 3 tons. So if you do a multiplication of that times 2.3 million, you get somewhere between 5 and 6 million tons of stone was used in the construction of it. So how long did they take to build the Great Pyramid? I think Herodotus claims it took like over 20 years for it to be built. I think I remember he said took him like several years just to build the ramps up to it, to actually construct it before they actually built the actual pyramid itself. Of course, the thing that's famous about all the pyramids is, there's all kinds of theories on, how the pyramids were constructed. I know people like to say aliens built the pyramids and things like that, but they do think it was built by human hands, pretty much, with Bronze Age tools. They use copper and bronze, stone type tools to build most of these structures. Herodotus, as you know, book 2 of his histories is basically the oldest source on how they think the pyramids were built. So he's writing about 2,000 years or more after they were built. So there's a lot of, all kinds of theories about how they were constructed. But the main belief about how they were built was predominantly they used forced human labor to basically move the blocks into place because of the fact that the Egyptians did not have actual draft animals. So they didn't have oxen or anything like that. Horses were not introduced till later. I think I want to say the second intermediate period. So they didn't have like draft animals. So brute human force. It was used. I think most historians and also engineers, architects believe that pretty much some kind of ramping systems using mostly mud brick were used to basically build those structures. If you go to Karnak, the temple complex, they actually have proof of that, of actually these ramps that they would build up to some of these structures to build like pylons and things like that. And so that's likely how they built these structures. I think the debate is about how they got them up to the top, but it's believed that a lot of the blocks on the bottom are very heavy, and the ones on top are actually more lighter. So I've heard some theories that some of the blocks on the bottom of the pyramid might weigh as much as like 30 to 80 tons, some crazy amount in the actual pyramid. So obviously they were pretty advanced, the Egyptians, to build these structures. Herodotus claimed they used slave labor and used like pulley systems, things like that, lever systems, but they don't think that kind of thing came into line in use for architecture until really Greek Roman times. Scaffolding, by the way, was not introduced until the New Kingdom later. So they didn't have that either, scaffolding. So anyway, it's kind of talking about the theories of how the pyramids were built and things like that. But yeah, let me go ahead and also talk about the inside of the Great Pyramid, because that's one thing that's also well known about the Great Pyramid, is that it's got a lot of different chambers that are actually on the inside. It's got numerous chambers. I'll put them on the screen for you, but they have at least 4 in it. The false tomb chamber, which some people call it the subterranean chamber, I think is another name they dub it. Queen's chamber, Grand Gallery, of course, running up to the King's chamber as well. And they think the one on the bottom, which has got different names, like the false tomb chamber here, they think it may have been put in to fool tomb robbers. But evidently it didn't work. If you know, the Great Pyramid was broken into in ancient times. The whole thing was robbed. And it was hard to get into because they have like these massive stones here that were put to kind of block people from getting in there. I think some of those stones weighed tons. They were able to remove them, which is amazing. So you got that. They had this so-called Queen's Chamber, which was right here. The Arabs, when they took over ancient Egypt, called it that because they thought it was used as a tomb, like a burial chamber for like one of like Khufu's wives, but they don't think that's true. I think there's a theory that they put a statue of Khufu in there that represented his soul. Then you got this grand gallery that runs up into the King's chamber. And the King's chamber, of course, had his sarcophagus in there where Khufu was buried. And of course, in ancient times, like I said, it was robbed. His mummy, they don't know what happened to it. It's gone. Maybe aliens took it, that kind of thing. But what's interesting about the tomb of, like the chamber of Khufu where he was buried, the actual sarcophagus, like the crypt he was buried into, is actually larger than the actual opening into the room. So they actually put that in there where they were building the pyramid. So it's kind of crazy about that. But the early, a lot of the early pyramids do not have any writing. You will find like graffiti inside a lot of the pyramids. And I think they say there's a worker of some type that put some kind of word at the top. I think in Demotic, which is a type of cursive hieroglyph where he mentions Khufu, and so that's why they think he built it. But there's all kinds of theories that it was built by somebody else, and I won't go into the alien thing and stuff like that. But that's, I think it was one theory that was kind of funny, that people thought that the pyramids were used to store grain a long time ago, which probably not. So, but yeah, there's other controversies too about, about the pyramid. They have found shafts. You go to that picture there that I've got showing the actual inside of the pyramid, which is right here. They have these different air shafts that are in it. They have sent robots in there to see like what's down these air shafts. And actually they found a new chamber just recently inside Khufu's pyramid a few years ago. They drilled actually into it, but they don't know what's in it. But they did find like a door with handles on it, which is very interesting about that. So there may be other rooms inside the pyramid, but they'd have to take it apart probably to find it, most likely. All right, let me go ahead and move on. I want to go ahead and talk about some of the other, they have other pyramids, of course, that were built at that site by the 4th dynasty. Of course, the other one that's well known is the Pyramid of Khafre, who's also called Khephren as well. He, by the way, was the son of King Khufu, or Cheops. He built a pyramid right afterwards. I think there's even a theory that Khafre may have finished Khufu's pyramid and started building his. That's what it took so long to build the Great Pyramid. But they do think it's the second tallest pyramid ever built in ancient Egypt. One thing that's famous about Khafre's pyramid is you'll notice that the upper casing is still there. So the white limestone casing. So that's one way you tell the difference between the Great Pyramid of Khufu and Khafre's pyramid. Because sometimes you'll see like images where they'll show all the pyramids together. Where was that? We're like right here. It's kind of hard to tell which is which. Like some people think this is the Great Pyramid. That's actually the Great Pyramid. And this one right here is Khafre's pyramid, his son's pyramid. And Menkaure is the son of Khafre. So it's like basically father, son, and grandson that you're basically looking at right there. But yeah, Khafre's pyramid, of course, it's, I'll give you the total dimensions on it, but 471 feet they think was the original height, which I think it's shrunk too, like also Khufu's pyramid, Great Pyramid. 706 feet is about the width on each side, like each length of each side, basically, which probably is around 12 acres in size, a little smaller. But both of them are massive. Those two, of course, are basically the two largest pyramids ever constructed in ancient. Maybe it was robbed in ancient times, but most people didn't really know about it until the 1810s. 1818, this guy named Giovanni Belzoni, you may have heard of him. He was a famous, maybe he's a tomb robber kind of, but he's a famous explorer that went to Egypt after Napoleon came into Egypt. He explored like all the pyramids, and he found a bunch of other tombs. And he also found like the famous temple of Ramses the Great. I think they call it at I think in southern Sudan, southern Egypt. And anyway, one thing that's very, very famous about the Pyramid of Khafre, it's known for this complex in front of it that's part of the so-called Great Sphinx, which was part of a temple complex that was built from a causeway that ran, they think, from the Pyramid of Khafre all the way to that. And the Great Sphinx, or Sphinx as they call it for short, is considered one of the most famous, mysterious type statues that was ever built in ancient Egypt. And it's a famous royal statue, by the way, that was built from natural limestone that was actually there on the site. It was kind of like between between where the Great Pyramid of Giza is and Khafre's pyramid that was there. And you know about the Sphinx is like this mythical type creature that's part man, part lion, like the body of a lion and the head of a man. And it was believed to represent the power of the pharaoh, like his, I guess power as a ruler. Lions are ferocious and things like that. And so that's why I guess they picked the lion as that kind of image. Of course, there's theories about, the construction of it. I think the main theory is that King Khafre built it, but they believe it represented his father Khufu. So they think the actual face on the actual Sphinx is actually Khufu or Cheops. And the dimensions on it if you want. I don't know if that's really necessary, but it's about 240 feet long. The length from, I guess from its feet to the back of it. The height of it, like from the top of the head, I guess where the crown was, to the bottom, it's about 66 feet high. And then the width of it is about 62 feet. And it has gone through a lot of disrepair. It's been rebuilt, like repaired several times. As you know, it does not have a nose. It's famous for its nose being blown off in modern times, because I think in modern times, if you know about it, I don't know if it was Napoleon's time or when the Turks took over, but people would sometimes use it for target practice and shoot at it. They blew off the nose. And so part of the nose is actually in the Cairo Museum, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. I think they still have part of it. It's also got that dream stela that's in front. I don't know if you can see that or not, which is right here. That was put there by the New Kingdom Pharaoh, Thutmose IV, I think is the 18th dynasty. And he put it there because he heard there was a story that if you unburied the actual Sphinx, because it had been buried by sand for years, you would become the Pharaoh of Egypt. And so he did it, and he became Pharaoh. And so he put that dream stela there, I guess because of that. There's also a legend about the Sphinx, which there was a story that it was like a watchdog, like watching over everyone. Like no matter where you were, it would probably be looking at you. So you move to the left, it looked at you. Move to the right, it looked at you. So it's kind of weird the way it was built, the actual face. And people call it the Father of Terror, or Father of the Terror, was its nickname. And so people were superstitious about it. And there was a legend that if you were like a traveler wandering through the land and you came upon the Sphinx, it would ask you a riddle. And if you couldn't answer it, it would destroy you, like eat you. So that's probably just a legend. But the Sphinx has been around for years. I think the Greeks thought it was like this statue standing up because it had been buried for years. But now they know it's not. So Sphinx is like kind of this mysterious, statue that people still have a lot of ideas about. There's even theories that there's something buried under it and all that. Because people actually have buried passages on it. They actually dug underneath to see what was actually there. All right. Also, I want to move on. I want to talk about as well, they have Menkaure, Pyramid of Menkaure. He's another famous pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, the son of Khafre. He's got a pyramid as well, which this one, of course, not as famous as the other two pyramids that were built at Giza. It's called Pyramid of Menkaure, or also Mykerinos, is his other name that he goes by. Built in the later part of the 26th century. This pyramid's kind of small. It's the 3rd tallest of the Giza pyramids originally. They think originally it was about 215 feet tall. I think it's now about 205 now, they think, around. And they think each side is about 339 feet. So what's the deal with that? Like, why, if you look at that picture and you compare that one with the other pyramid of Khafre, you can see that obviously, his pyramid is much smaller compared to the other pyramids. Well, there's all kinds of theories about why Menkaure, built such a small pyramid. I believe there's two main theories. The popular theory today is that it was economic reasons. The fact that building both these pyramids before Great Pyramid, Khafre's pyramid, practically bankrupted the country. Spent all that money doing it. And so he built a smaller pyramid for his mummy. Herodotus had another theory. He said that Khafre and Khufu were these rulers that were tyrants that treated their people real bad, used them as slaves to build them, and so they think Menkaure was more benevolent, more nicer type ruler, and so he built a smaller pyramid to not torture him, building such a huge tomb. But I think the former idea was probably what happened, because I think now they think that they necessarily weren't tyrants, and I think a lot of people actually would put in to build these pyramids. It was like a national project, kind of like a WPA project or something like that, to build something for the country and for the pharaoh. And so a lot of people would pitch in, of course, to build it. A lot of farmers were used, especially when the flood season was around, when they couldn't really farm much. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of like the pyramids. And they do have other pyramids. Like at that site, I think they've got like these so-called Queen's pyramids, I think that they've got. They were built there, which a lot of these were actually little bitty pyramids that were constructed for mostly Khufu's, like two of his wives. And I think the one on the far right was built for his mother, which you can see right here. They also got these boat pits. If you go to that site there, Egypt, they've actually kind of reconstructed a huge boat that Khufu may have used to bury himself. And a lot of the ancient Egyptians thought that they would need boats in the afterlife to make a celestial voyage and things like that. And so they would put like all kinds of stuff in their chamber with a burial chamber to I guess, to ready themselves for the afterlife. So the Egyptians built a lot of pyramids. I think up to like maybe 80 pyramids may have been constructed at one point throughout ancient Egypt. But after the Old Kingdom, they kept building them like up to the Middle Kingdom, but they weren't built very well. Later pyramids. That's the peak of really pyramid building, is the 4th dynasty. But they do build pyramids up to about the 12th dynasty. All right. I want to talk about one more thing today, and that's probably it. I want to go ahead and move on to talk about hieroglyphic writing. We'll get into that, and I'll mostly talk about the development and discovery of the Rosetta Stone, what happened with that. And the ancient Egyptians, they're kind of classified as an Afro-Asiatic people. So these are kinds of peoples that live in North Africa, Southwestern Asia. Their language is kind of similar to more like Berber, I think it is, Semitic, kind of similar languages that were spoken around that region in North Africa. Hieroglyphic writing, or hieroglyphs, whatever you want to call it, is a type of language system that uses a mix of logographs or logograms, like syllabic type symbols, and also an alphabet, which it is. It's an alphabet. I think they said from that previous video on Tuesday, 700 symbols may have been used originally a long time ago, like going back to the Old Kingdom, but depending on the time period, it's anywhere from 500 to 3,000 type of symbols may have been used originally in their alphabet that they used. But the term hieroglyph or hieroglyphic, the term they used later, was a Greek term that the Greeks started using in ancient times. And it comes from two words. You can see there, hiero is a word that means either sacred or priestly, and then glyph means either carving or writing. So sacred carvings, priestly carvings, writings. They called it that because the fact that a long time ago, the main people that could read the hieroglyphic writing was mostly your priestly class, the ones that were educated and all that, nobility, etc. And mostly the upper class were the ones that were educated, could use the languages and things like that. And they also developed, cursive types of forms of hieroglyphs. Hieratic, I think, being the first they used, especially by the New Kingdom. And then Demotic was also used as well. So both of those were different types of hieroglyphic writing that became popular. And they developed they developed cursive forms of hieroglyphic writing because of papyrus, paper. It's easier to write on paper that way, and a lot quicker. And they probably used a lot for administrative stuff, which keeping records and things like that from a long time ago. And hieroglyphic writing goes back almost 5,000 years. So it's one of the oldest forms of writing system, going up there with like the cuneiform, like the Sumerians developed. Now, what happened though with the hieroglyphic writing, if you know about it, it was lost in the Middle Ages. Like nobody could read it. They say the Romans who came in and became, Christian and all that, killed off all the priests that could, read the language. And then you had all these other languages that were more easily to read, like phonetic alphabets like Arabic, Greek, Latin, etc. And so those all replaced hieroglyphs as the main kind of language they used. And so pretty much by the Middle Ages, nobody could, read it. However, what happened was in the 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt with his armies. He was fighting the British Empire, and he thought if he took over Egypt, he could destroy their empire, especially their trade with Asia, like India and all that. And so he came in there, and Napoleon was very interested in ancient Egypt. He thought there was a lot of mysteries about it and that they could learn about the past, and maybe there were secrets that could help his empire, his future empire, and all that. And so what happened was it was discovered in 1799 in a place called town called Rosetta, which is in the delta of Egypt, of the Nile Basin. And this soldier named Pierre-Francois Bouchard found it in a fort called Fort Julian. And it was actually this half-ton stone you're looking at that was found actually in the wall. It was actually pulled out of the wall. And Bouchard realized at that point that this stone was probably important. It had some kind of writing on it and all that. And what happened was it took years for it to get translated, but eventually they think in 1822, this Frenchman named Jean-Francois Champollion, who got a copy of it, was able to translate it, like a transliteration of it. And what it was about, the actual stone, was an inscription on it that discussed the coronation of one of the Ptolemaic kings, Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt back in the 2nd century. He was being crowned as king of Egypt. His name was Ptolemy V. And what happened was apparently because of the fact that not everybody knew hieroglyphic writings and all that, they wrote it in multiple languages. It was written in 3 languages. The top part was hieroglyphs, like traditional hieroglyphic writing, Demotic, the cursive form I told you about they had. And then they also, the bottom section was written in Greek. So not everybody knew, I guess hieroglyphs or whatever, so they had in Greek as well. So that's basically, and how did Champollion translate it? Well, apparently what happened was Champollion knew Coptic. Coptic is a type of new alphabet that was introduced to Egypt, which was kind of like a cross between hieroglyphs and what is Greek. And so he was able to use the Coptic alphabet to figure out, I think Demotic, I think is what it was. And then from there, he was able to figure out hieroglyphs. And of course, they knew Greek. And so that was enabled Champollion to be, by the way, one of the first Egyptologists. I think he was one of the first actually to go to Egypt and start reading some of the buildings. And so that's why we know more about ancient Egypt, because we've been able to translate the language. And really the 2 biggest things, I think the 2 biggest discoveries in ancient Egypt, was Rosetta Stone and King Tut's tomb. Now, the only thing about the Rosetta Stone, which I will mention, it is controversial. The Rosetta Stone, as you know, is in the British Museum in London. And of course, the Egyptians want it back in modern times, but they won't give it back to them. And so that's a big controversy today. Of course, a lot of these countries like Britain, France, Germany, etc., have a lot of Egyptian stuff that they have, that they took from Egypt. So that's like, 1800s, 1900s, you got people going in, kind of like tomb robbing and things like that, stealing stuff and bringing it back to the museums, like Indiana Jones, basically. And so that's something that's kind of prevalent throughout that period. So I don't think they found the Ark, though, of the Covenant. Oh, yeah, of course, Brandon's asking when our first test. Of course, I've talked about that already, sent out email. But Thursday, of course, our first online exam, of course, will be coming up, which will be online, as you know. Of course, I'll be announcing that, an announcement on Thursday about it coming up. But pretty much, I still, of course, have to do, like on Thursday this week, I'll, of course, have a part 3 lecture coming up on ancient Egypt. Don't forget, there are study guides I've got posted on Canvas you can use to prepare for the exam coming up. I will have a review, which will be recorded, I know, on the study guide sections, prehistory, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. I'll have that for you Thursday, which will be part of the actual quiz exam. It's like a quiz, but it's like an exam, basically. And but I will have a announcement later about our last lecture of the week, which will be coming up on ancient Egypt tomorrow. So I don't think we have any other questions right now, as far as I can tell. But don't forget, if you got any comments, questions later, about this lecture or previous lectures that you've got, let me know, of course, on my YouTube channel. And so that's it for today. Of course, I will see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be kind of talking about mostly the New Kingdom. I'll kind of wrap up ancient Egypt. I don't really cover much on the Middle Kingdom. I'll maybe briefly talk about it, but I'll mostly talk about the New Kingdom, empire building period of ancient Egypt. And I'll kind of go into some of the famous pharaohs that were well known from that time. So that's it for today. I'll see you later, like I said, in the week, tomorrow on Thursday. So y'all take care of all that.